Should public money be spent on universal preschool? Originally, I began to learn about the benefits of preschool on young children, benefits that continued into their older years and future academics. I originally come into question of public money being spent on universal preschool and thought that it was a good idea. After investigating, I believe that instead of just throwing money at the problem, we should do more research and investigate better methods before we put tons of money into universal preschool. Before we get into the specifics of universal preschool and the supposed benefits, I want you to think about our current school system. When our children complete preschool and are old enough to enroll in kindergarten, what will they be transitioning into? So now we envision that we provide more children and access to an early childhood education through preschool. They now move into a kindergarten program and later into elementary grades. Even if there were educational benefits that were gained during preschool, with our current educational system, do we really expect these kids to benefit to continue to be a parent in a class of 40 kids and one teacher? What kind of quality education do they now receive with their new elementary teacher, who just completed the minimum amount of schooling to become a teacher, who in their first year of teaching is teaching a classroom? How can we expect to provide more early education opportunities to younger children that we are lacking quality teachers everywhere in the field? Student districts across the nation have all different standards required to become an early childhood educator. There are very few states that have the necessary programs in place to properly certify and accredit teachers who have the experience and knowledge necessary to cater to younger children. California began one of the few states that have begun providing permits for educators of young children. Other states treat pre-K and preschool programs as a subsidized child care system. While they do try to include certain things into the daily curriculum, when they are being taught by someone who has minimal teaching experience, then the outcome is beneficial, but not much more than a babysitter. We also see that in some districts, the middle to upper class families end up receiving more funding. These districts are scoring better on assessments, and then they get high-end sanctions against, or then they do not end up with sanctions against them. Schools that score bad on assessments end up rotating teachers quickly and have a hard time keeping students engaged because they have different teachers all the time and don't have quality teachers to help them. The resources required to properly teach and provide an interactive and well-planned educational experience and funding to support all of that doesn't happen in these schools because they're not scoring the high enough scores for the accreditation. When we fail to fund the school systems as a whole, those in low income and disadvantaged areas lose out the most. Research studies that report better future success from receiving a quality early education only show decent gains from low income or disadvantaged areas, and not much, if any, from middle to upper class areas. Most studies that show educational benefits in future schooling only showed significant gains for low-income families. Most research studies have specifically targeted those from low-income areas, and these studies cannot simply be generalized to all families across all income brackets. When we're looking to spend more money on programs that may help these that cannot afford them, then maybe we should create programs that target them specifically. When students from upper and middle class neighborhoods and school districts have been studied and have shown to make no significant gains, then why create programs that can help them? We can create a much more targeted program that is not necessarily for all. The preschool for all idea sounds good for when you say it, but I do not believe we should include everyone in these programs and we end up spreading out the funding across more children when we could focus it on the disadvantaged students and the students that are really in need and lack the socioeconomic money to get help or to get extra tutoring and things like that. How do you successfully study the progress and success of young children into teens and then into adulthood, while still having a large sample, minimizing variables across the nation. There are very few long-term studies that span decades to properly measure the success from early childhood education. The one study that has shown gains into adulthood had issues when looking at the sample size. Other variables, such as targeting specific locales and the culture and other community backgrounds of the children, cannot be properly removed from the studies. And many studies show that while there were gains, they have not been able to reproduce them with groups of children. There may be other reasons a group of children has shown gains compared to others. Something as big as this would definitely require a lot more time and money, just to even begin to suggest the reason why certain groups of children are more successful than others. Based on possibly having a year or more of a pre-K program is quite difficult. The family situation, the schools attending, the teachers they interact with, the social experience in schools are all variables that can affect the outcome and results. We hear that investing $1 in high-quality preschool now will have a return of $7. So how can this be? We hear this statistic touted as a reason for universal preschool. The idea for this came from the results of economic analysis of a small 2-year program that targeted low-income families in Michigan. While the program was a success, the average cost per child today, adjusted for inflation, was around $19,000 a year. Most state programs we will be expending on only cost $6,100 per student at 1-year program. The idea that we will be able to start spending the same per student for a wider array of more students for $19,000 per student sounds a bit off. So what can we do? Well, I am all for making changes to current education policies and systems. We definitely need to ensure that our children are properly educated, since they will be the future of our society. There are many issues that should be fixed and resolved in our school system before we start throwing money into a glorified daycare. We should spend more money, time, different ways and ideas of improving our school system and education our children receive today, but it will not be as easy as some would think.